Boris Johnson has also announced Britain will hit 5 Russian banks and 3 wealthy individuals with sanctions under a first barrage of punitive measures ahead of a feared full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Prime Minister describes the troops being sent by Mr. Vladimir Putin into Donbas region under the guise of peacekeepers as a renewed invasion of Ukraine. He says the Russian president is establishing the pretext for a full-scale offensive, as he warns that it could include the capture of the capital Kiev by the nearly 200,000 troops amassed on Ukraine's borders.
Should be in no doubt that the deployment of these forces in sovereign Ukrainian territory amounts to a renewed invasion of that country. And by denying Ukraine's legitimacy as a state and presenting its very existence as a mortal threat to Russia, Putin is establishing the pretext for a full-scale offensive. We must now brace ourselves for the next possible stages of Putin's plan. The violent subversion of areas of eastern Ukraine by Russian operatives and their hirelings, followed by a general offensive by the nearly 200,000 Russian troops gathered on the frontiers at peak readiness to attack.
And joining me now is the head of program Regional Europe, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, Sam van der Stark. He joins me from Stockholm, Sweden. He joins me virtually. Good to have you join us.
Glad to be here.
So how would you describe the activities of Russian troops in Donetsk and Luhansk? Can we actually say that invasion has begun, or is this an incursion at this moment?
What we're seeing currently is a situation where Russia is confirming the status quo because the 2 regions they have invaded were already out of the direct control of the authorities of Ukraine. But it is an important signal. It's a signal that President Putin has been wanting to upskill and increase its threat on Ukraine's integrity, but also its democracy. And that's what is currently under threat. Not just the territorial integrity, but also how will Ukraine's democracy, which is very vibrant and has been growing over the past years, be able to resist such that the citizens of Ukraine will also be willing to continue their fight against the foreign invasion.
When you see the critical decisions being made by President Putin in the last 48 hours, recognizing Luhansk and Donetsk as independent regions and also sending troops to that region, does this tell you that Putin, do you think that Putin was ever interested in diplomacy, or he was basically trying to buy time?
Well, this is what most Western observers are still hoping, that there's still a chance for diplomacy. And what we're currently seeing is that a lot of the sanctions that are being imposed are a way to up the pressure, to get Putin back to the negotiation table. So the hope has not been given up yet that diplomacy will still work. Certainly in Ukraine, there is, by the authorities there, the hope that a military escalation is still, we can still avoid it, at least a full invasion. So diplomacy is still on the table, but what Mr. Putin has in mind, very few people know at the moment.
But is there any situation where Putin rolls back escalation? Do you see any situation that forces him or allows him in terms of diplomacy, pushes him to roll back escalation? Is there any situation like that?
Well, it's definitely possible. And I think this is the moment where all of the West, all not just European and North American partners, but all democracies have to unite and should make it clear that it's the people of Ukraine who decide over the future of Ukraine and not Russia, not the leadership of Russia. So there's a couple of instruments that they can use. Of course, we've seen the sanctions that the US, the EU, and also the UK have rolled out that are increasing the pressure. And some of those have been stronger than we anticipated, especially the German decision to temporarily halt the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline has been a bit of a surprise, but a positive one. So as long as these escalation measures still exist, I think there's an opportunity to get President Putin back to the negotiation table. But it's really a matter of all sticking together and making sure that there's space to further escalate the counter-pressure to the military provocations that have been happening.
And it's interesting you mentioned Nord Stream 2, halting of the Nord Stream 2. Isn't that perhaps the biggest card up the sleeves of the Western allies of Ukraine? Because one would have thought that that would come later, seeing how much that project means to Russia.
I think Germany has been keeping that card, that instrument, up its sleeve for a long time, right? The German chancellor has not been willing to use that threat for a long time, but clearly a red line has been crossed. So it seems that Germany has been wanting to make a clear sign that things are not the way they're supposed to be, and that now is the time to de-escalate, and that this is their way to give off that signal. So there are further instruments, there are further sanctions that especially the EU has in mind to roll out if things further escalate from the side of Russia. And the good sign that we're seeing now is that all democratic forces, the US, of course, the EU, the UK, but also further afield, are all united in a way that they weren't before. So this has really brought together a lot of countries around the values of democracy that also Ukraine is upholding and has been upholding under the threat of Russia for the past 8 years. So there is a situation that very few people anticipated until just a few weeks ago. There's a very strong unity within the West. So I think we're not seeing the end of this situation yet.
Just few minutes ago, let's say about 20 minutes ago, Turkey announced that it is offering to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. What influence does Turkey bring to the table apart from neutrality? What other influence does Turkey have in this issue?
Well, Turkey is an important player because, of course, it's a NATO ally. So it's not just a big country in the region with historic relations with both Ukraine, the EU, and Russia, but it has a formal stake within NATO. So it's important that Turkey plays a role. At the same time, it's clear that the big players around the table are currently the traditional Western partners, the democracies, the ones that uphold the values that Ukraine has been striving for over the past 8 years since the hostilities with Russia began. So a credible negotiator will always have to include the ones that have been negotiating for the past 8 years or so since the conflict with Russia broke out. That's Germany, France, the UK. And I think those will remain crucial if we want to find a solution to this conflict. But of course, the influence of Turkey is an important one, so it has to be included.
So you are in Sweden. Are there fears in Sweden that this could escalate further in terms of the broader security architecture of Europe?
Well, there are certainly fears across Europe, and President Putin has made it clear that he sees the presence of NATO troops not just in Ukraine, or the threat were they to be posted in Ukraine, but even in the countries that are currently already NATO members as a threat. He sees that as something that he would like to reverse. So multiple countries in Europe are considering this as not just a Ukrainian problem, but something that is affecting unity within the EU, their security, but also their democratic values. As we know, the European Union is not just an economic construct, but a democratic, a values construct. So the threat to just one of them is a threat to all of them. And the Nordics, the Sweden, Finland, Denmark are all seeing this as something that is affecting them directly, and even more so the Baltic states, who used to be part of the Soviet Union and are really in the front line since they share a border with Russia.
The world actually is watching. It means a lot. It is not just Europe. I mean, it could have a greater impact on even places in Africa as well. We are watching this and hoping that diplomacy works. Thank you so much for talking to us. Head of Program Regional Europe, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, Sam van der Stack.
Thank you.